Yeah, oh, there we go. Okay, sweet. Okay. So sorry that took so long, everybody. Going to the slideshow.
It only took an extra 10 minutes.
Only extra 10 minutes. Okay, so
It'll come back. There you go.
welcome to a complete history of furry fandom. Sorry for leaving things. So it's presented by me and Solus, the gray muzzle, and I am the young person who everybody's going to look at and say, "You're too young to know this."
No, they're going to assume that you're too young to have known it from experience.
Oh, absolutely.
They'll know you did the research, trust me.
The fandom's older than I am, by far. So,
Very much so.
I'm going to go ahead and speed run some of this.
Yep.
Just a little bit. Who are we? My name is Scar. I think I've already introduced myself. I go by Scar the Fur on a lot of different platforms. I've been in the fandom since 2016. Furry historian, obviously that's why I'm here. And outside of that, I'm a 3D artist. I do YouTube, but a lot of different things, but mostly 3D art right now. I'm doing stuff like VR chat. This is Kid the Solus.
Hi, I'm the older one. I've been in the fandom since '98, and I'm pretty much the anecdote here. I'm a YouTuber and a streamer, and at some point a commentator, but apparently some people don't like the commentary.
So that's his Sona, that's one of mine. That's I guess that's one of my 3D models I did, was the
That's
way.
your cute little space chicken.
I did that outfit in staff back for the last Virality, Sylva. And these are our channels, if you for any reason you want to check them out. So an introduction, why do we care so much about furry history? A lot of people who are in the fandom, it's a very casual sort of thing, and you know, it's about life in the moment. Not a lot of people are going to think about, oh hey, how exactly old is this phenomenon? How old furry fandom is pretty old, and for some people it's a very interesting niche to kind of figure out where exactly we all came from as a community. I'm guessing that's why you all are here. So how old is the fandom? Anyone want to take a guess real quick? There's technically no right answer, but rough one. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll say 1800s.
No.
I'd like to say the 1950s.
Closer, but no.
40,000 years ago.
No.
Ancient Egypt.
Sure, yeah, you're back in the red.
If you want to get on with that technicality, talk me after the panel.
Okay. What?
1980s?
Yes, pretty much. So somewhere in there. But it's hard to pin down an exact year, but pretty much the 1980s.
Because it's hard to pin down when the first two furries today figured out, hey, we both like the same thing.
That is true. So other members of the community have also covered furry history. Obviously, Mark Molino, Rod O'Reilly, if you're familiar with them, I do not believe they are here this year at the con, which is unfortunate, but the timing of the con was also unfortunate for a lot of people. So I'm kind of the young coot here. Obviously, there's people like Ash Coyote, who did a wonderful documentary on the fandom.
I was honestly half hoping that those two were going to show up, because having them in the audience, I know your ass would be sitting here just...
I actually would have been more scared than anything.
Uh-huh.
So what am I trying to do different? There's a couple things I always try to do different with talking about furry history. The one personal thing that always bothered me a little bit is it felt like a lot of the people who talk about it aren't very comprehensive. And it's obviously Ash Coyote. Furry Nation, Joe Strike, it's a book on the fandom's history. Good example. Really covers the origins really well, but this is where I was kind of going into. A lot of the people who talk about the fandom really focus on the earlier years, and also the in-person aspects mostly, but there's a lot of fandom history that really isn't just talked about, like namely the last 20 years. But also like the early internet isn't discussed super well.
Or accurately, the last 25 to 30 years.
25 to 30, yeah, that's true. That's pretty on point. So we're going to be going through everything, including the recent stuff.
As much of it as we can.
Much as we can.
Because, again, if you want to go down that rabbit hole later, maybe after the panel.
This panel is going to serve as an overview for everything up, including the modern day. Yeah, pretty much. That being said, I don't actually know how long this panel is going to take. I'm hoping I can squeeze it in 2 hours. It might actually end up being shorter than that. But we're covering a lot very quickly. That's why this is being recorded. So if you ever want to go back and look at it on YouTube, you you can only go in so in depth when you're talking this much, but
Yes.
we're gonna try. Also, history is primarily told through U.S. Furry fandom across different regions of the world. It's different countries. It's very regionalized. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to discover a lot about foreign fandoms unless I want to learn a foreign language or find somebody. But a lot of early furry history is based in the U.S. Not all of it, but a lot of the early stuff. And that's more of where this panel is kind of focused, since
We didn't fully infect the world until roughly the late 2000s, so.
there's a lot to cover. We're going to try and move a little quicker than you expect based on the panels. Again, like I said, there's a lot to discover, a lot to go over. This panel is going to be chonky. I don't know why I worded it like that. It is going to be recorded. Yep. There are some touchy subjects. Okay, so this is my warning. My warning. Yeah, trigger warning, basically. So, furry history, especially over the last decade specifically, there are some topics that are not very, they're controversial. They're not very fun to talk about. But I felt the need to include them because it's still history. As I've learned,
And understanding the negative aspects of any history or any culture's history is a good way to make sure that we don't do the same thing over again at some point.
everybody's important, everyone enjoys it, lest we repeat it. Because if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it.
Exactly.
It sounds dumb, but you can learn. You can look at what worked in the past and what didn't work, and hopefully not follow down that same path. So just real quick, obviously we're going to talk about politics to some degree, sexual aspects, no surprise there. Recent dramas, other sensitive topics. I'm not here to provide opinions. My goal is to just state things as they are. Obviously, I have my personal feelings on just about everything, but
Again,
I'm
he's
not-
the fact I'm typically.
I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not here to start discussions or drama or anything. I'm just here to talk about how it is. So, when it comes to furry fandom, something that I've done personally is I kind of mark different eras where it's hard to do I describe it? No, okay. Basically, they're basically like eras of the fandom where I feel like one specific, how do I describe this? An era of the fandom.
Literally, it can be described as an era of the
An era of the fandom.
a large chunk of time in our history.
Where one thing kind of was prominently on display that I feel like represents either the broader community or the mainstream community as kind of the focal point. It's a little esoteric, but I think you'll understand as we go. So obviously we have the grassroots, which is like proto-fandom.
It's things like
The
the
base-
zines up here
the
were
zines, yeah.
kind of part of the grassroots before the internet was a huge thing. The next thing was kind of, oh, actually, no, you had it.
I literally have all of
I'm
them.
talking about.
Grassroots is like when we started. Pre-fandom,
Grassroots is way early.
Yeah.
Okay.
golden age is pretty much the pre-internet fandom.
That's the one I was thinking. That's what those are from.
Furry Renaissance, which is 1998 to 1989 to 1998, that's where like basically a lot of evolution occurred that kind of put the fandom on the track of where it is now.
Suits became a modern, or not modern, but a real
Suits
thing.
became a
People
thing,
started putting
personas became a
more
thing, conventions,
effort in their sound.
art was distributed in various ways. Furries versus the media. For anybody who's familiar with the furries' involvement with the media in the past, and how we've gotten along pretty well, especially in the early days.
And if you
If you
haven't, this
haven't-
is where my stuff usually comes in, because this is when I started. This was the kind of crap I watched happen. There were a lot of shows like 1,000 Ways to Die or My Strange Addiction that would take our community and portray us in an insanely bad light. Or we had things like the news that would straight up just accuse us of being
I do have some screenshots and clips.
some really negative shit.
So the internet age, which is about where a lot of historians like to cut off. The birth of the mainstream internet. So obviously in the early days, big corporates didn't run the internet nearly as much as they do now. There's a lot more furry independent websites. Stuff like this would evolve into art websites. These became a lot less more prominent.
Things like the Vixen controlled library would take up where the distributed physical copies left off, and a lot of the physical copies actually got put onto places like that. We have a question.
Not really a question, more like something that I was a part of during the 2016 to 2019 area.
Yeah,
The gamers the gamers versus furries war.
I mean,
That was something we were going to get to.
what did you do? Please don't do that. Let's not do that again.
Well, we now have two projections of this. If you can't see it from the back, just turn around. There's one literally behind me now.
Gamers versus Furry War is one thing I have yet to look into, so it is not a part of this panel. But I will say there is plenty to talk about already. So
Oh yeah.
if I host this panel again in the future, I am all for iterating it. And obviously the political war, everybody's favorite topic.
Which side were you on?
And
lost.
More recently, the virtual evolution. So COVID-19 was a real big shake up for the fandom with, you know, how cons and stuff are no longer as available. And so VR really kind of took off with things like Reality, and obviously YouTube has followed in its wake. And I kind of personally feel like we might be in the start of a new era right now, but I'll talk about that at the end of the panel. So obviously the grassroots anthropomorphism is old. I'm sure everybody's heard the joke about ancient Egypt by now. In the modern
It's way older than that. Trust me.
Let's not give them more fodder. In the modern era, it became a style for telling stories that is, for various reasons. Stories could be told without the human element, ironically making them more relatable, because you could remove all the human biases and all the segregation, like all of that, and just represent them with animals. So animals kind of have this universal appeal that, because they're separate from all of humanity, and they offer a lot of diversity. Far more than humans. Humans are diverse as hell, but when you factor in the entire animal kingdom and the collective imagination of all the fictional creatures, you're talking about something that
We've literally collectively created thousands of worlds in a shared universe.
and there are many other reasons. Yeah. So obviously, we got our little ancient Egypt guy here.
The first furry.
The first, yes, man's first furry.
Not first, but close.
First history, first furry in the modern conscious.
First one recorded in history.
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Obviously, there were some creatures in there. It came out in 1860. I think I made him laugh. And The Jungle Book, which you might be more familiar by its Disney adaptation, which came out in 1894. Would you like to say something? Or would you like to laugh into the mic so everybody can hear you?
First
Can you
things
breathe?
first, give me just a moment.
It took me a month and a half to put together this panel. If I'm a little scarce on some details, I'm sorry.
Second.
It's a lot to talk about. Yes? That wasn't the wrong cover.
No, you put in the right cover.
Wrong year.
That's fine. Alice in Wonderland. There were some animals in that. If you ever read the original book, understand you're in for a very dark story.
Oh, it's
what
like
was
a
happening.
lot
What
of.
got me giggling.
You ever seen like the original story of Hansel and Gretel? Yes. Let's just move on. Birth of the modern Anthropomorphism. So obviously 1800 literature, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, things like The Jungle Book, and then of course we came across World War II, which was an interesting time. Anthropomorphics were a newer phenomena, and they kind of reached their peak as being all ages for various reasons, including Disney deciding to use them in propaganda.
Nothing quite like the nightmare of Donald Duck being a Nazi.
That has got to be one of my favorite. Forgot. Disney tries to bury the hell out of that.
Disney tries to bury the hell out of a lot of things.
They shouldn't.
They really shouldn't.
Well,
because, again,
in today's social society, I don't know. Social. I
again,
won't go there.
if you try to bury your history, you eventually forget it and are doomed to repeat it.
Let's hope Disney does not get involved in another war. I do not think.
Let's hope Disney doesn't put out anything that's fucking remarkably racist again.
I'm sorry, but there's quite a few of them.
1900s literature, we have Charlotte's Web, Bambi. I've tried to say this about 50 times in my life. I know Leben Geschichte auf dem Walde. I know a little bit of German.
Close
Not
enough.
that much. But yeah, no, Bambi was German, if you weren't aware. So, into the mainstream, anthropomorphics. Disney made Steamboat Willie, who later would evolve into Mickey Mouse. That they are viciously fighting the copyright for nonstop, I believe. When's he set to come out? When's he set to come out in the public domain again? Right now?
2 years.
Like 2 years. Do you want to take that son if they're going to fight it again? Or succeed, rather?
I hope they succeed because otherwise that is going to become the biggest fucking meme in the world.
You thought Winnie the Pooh was bad? With
God, you
blood and
thought
honey?
You thought Winnie the Pooh was bad at blood and honey.
So,
If Mickey Mouse, any of his images, even the old ones, wind up public domain, we're going to wind up with Mickey Mouse themed horror movies and horrors and everything else.
so basically the legal version of the Pirates. We will get to that. We'll get to that soon. Retold many fables and stories because Disney's very original. So obviously The Lion King, while not a direct adaptation, got some side eyes for its influence from King of the White Lion. I do not remember what issue it is. I don't think it's the one I have, any of the ones I have here, but I was looking through these Yarp fanzines, and one of them actually mentions there was leaks for the Lion King movie before it came out. And even before it was released, people were drawing similarities to King of the White Lion.
There was actually a huge controversy over it.
I believe it.
Let's not get back into that.
Okay, let's not.
I
Watch your movie
wasn't
sucks
planning
and
to.
you'll
I lived
Yes.
through that controversy. I don't want to relive it.
So it became massive, sort of the introductory for many phrases of generation. I think we're kind of a little bit past this era, but about 10 years ago, you asked furries how they got into the fandom. You'd hear anything from Robin Hood to Lion King to pretty much Disney. And now we have Zootopia too, so they haven't
Robin
stopped.
Hood was the Zootopia of the 90s.
Animation, Disney were far from the only studio. Obviously, we had things like Looney Tunes underneath Warner Bros. Yogi Bear and Scooby-Doo from Hanna-Barbera. Scooby-Doo was a big part of my childhood. And of course, we got Steamboat Willie. And on to maturing the concept. So, anthromedia at the time was widely being marketed towards children, especially post World War II. The colorful and visual designs were appealing to a younger audience. They were also good at selling toys. They were instances of telling more mature stories, but they weren't as commonplace past World War II. Obviously, when the war was over, and I guess Disney wanted to move on. We had Animal Farm in 1945, which used animals to tell a story about politics. I had to read that in school. Anybody here ever read Animal Farm or see the movie? Planet of the Apes. That's a fun one.
God.
1963, a gritty French sci-fi novel that takes a group of humans to an alien world dominated by intelligent apes. My extent of that franchise so far was this PS1 game that was so hard I could not get past the first 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, my whole concept for that, or my whole thought for that movie concept is, great, let's go back in history and essentially, meet the things we were before evolution kicked in.
We got Watership Down from 1972, which was an adventure novel about rabbits. And of course we got Animal Farm, Planet of the Apes. That is very intimidating. I can't tell if that's a comic or just a giant portal.
The helmet.
Okay.
Hmm.
Something like that.
For those who don't know, apes way back when, much stronger than we have ever been as a species. So, terrifying thought for that movie. One of those things could technically pick you up and physically snap you in half with very little effort.
Kill it. I think someone's blowing
The
every
chimpanzee today could kill you.
The chimpanzee today can kill you.
I mean,
Back a couple thousand years ago, they could straight up snap you in half, rip your arms off.
So, okay. In adult, I just said mute button. In adult anthropomorphics, 60s and 70s saw a more relaxed attitude towards art and experimentation. Obviously, we had the sexual revolution that was coming around, and I'm sure many of you have heard of Fritz the Cat.
Yeah.
He was a comic strip created by Robert Crumb in the immigrant comic scene in 1965, and he featured heavily explicit and what people would deem offensive content. And he was adapted into a highly successful movie in 1972. And it was the first animated film to ever receive an X rating. I believe most of the animators did not put their names on there because being associated with that film could have got you blacklisted, if I'm not mistaken.
Understand, if somebody were to release a modern rendition of that, I have a feeling the furry community as a whole would have roughly the same reaction that people had to
Sausage Party?
No, what was his name? Argyle.
So it was the first independently animated film that grossed over $100,000, which with inflation is roughly about $750,000 today. And disagreements led to Crumb killing off the character shortly after. Well, the movie was a success, but behind the scenes it was not. That's the best way to put it. So we're not rated X for nothing, baby, and of course Fritz the Cat. That's from the comic. We're gonna talk about the Air Pirates. Anybody here familiar with them? The one gray muzzle in the front. Okay, so they were a group of cartoonists who created the Air Pirate Funnies in 1971, and they were founded by a man named Dan O'Neill. So APF was a satire comic based on Disney characters such as Mickey Mouse, and they prominently focused on adult content such as sex, drugs, and pretty much everything else that you could think of Disney would not be too fond of.
I reiterate, if they lose the license to Mickey Mouse in any fashion, I expect that there is going to, within a year, be a Fritz the Cat style thing involving Mickey Mouse.
So, as reported, O'Neill has had a strange eagerness to get sued by Disney, and the story goes is he had issues of pornographic Mickey Mouse that he smuggled into a board meeting, which resulted in Disney getting fed up enough and suing him for copyright infringement, trademark infringement, and a couple other things. I actually have a picture of the legal document after this. Although it would take multiple years, it was dragged out for almost a decade. In 1978, they lost. And O'Neill then published another one called the from the MLF.
Communique.
Communique. It was issue number 1 from the Mouse Liberation Front, and Disney tried to hold him in contempt of court. He then held an art show, and with him a collection of secret artists called the Mouse Liberation Front in New York City, Philadelphia, and San Diego in 1979. He then delivered the second one in person to Walt Disney Studios. This man had a weird fetish for getting caught lost in court, I guess. I don't know.
Understand, he was essentially that era equivalent of my ass. Think about it.
And eventually Disney dropped the charges because they figured it was not worth continuing. I chose a safe word picture here. I do not believe I have any explicit media in this panel, but obviously we do talk about things, and there are suggested clips and photos as is common for history. So this is probably going to be really hard to read, but this is actually a copy of the, I believe it was the court's outcome, or the legal outcome, the court outcome of Walt Disney Productions versus the Air Pirates. I'm not going to read this, but this was a real thing. I know it sounds made up, but furries, but people are stupid and they like to do silly stuff.
Do you have somewhere that people who are interested might actually be able to go to find this?
If you look up the Air Pirates on Google, like especially like Air Pirates Disney and Google, you'll find it like immediately. This is a web page from somewhere I'm trying to remember.
Cool.
So getting into the pre-fandom, I hope I'm not going. You want to check the time real quick so I make sure I'm not going too slow, because we do have a lot to get through.
It's been
Okay. So the first steps.
the 20 minutes. We started 10 minutes later.
In the pre-fandom, I guess I forgot to key that and mention. So the underground comic scene would continue to evolve as a place for mature intro stories, past things like Fritz the Cat, and APAs and fanzines would become common as for independent artists to release their works, because they didn't have internet back then. There was no Furfinity, there was no E621.
Imagine this. Instead of going onto a website to find furries, you had to bump into one on the fucking street,
And join a mailing list.
or in a like at work or what have you, and you have to figure out, we both have this particular strangeness in common. Not an easy thing to do.
Do you have any copies of either Rudy or Rob Brazel?
I do not personally, but if you ever run across Marlena and O'Reilly, they have a much vaster collection than I do.
They have an unbelievably massive collection, if you're willing to travel there.
Yarf was graciously donated to me by Chris Grant. I bought this myself off eBay. These things are very expensive on eBay, but I wanted a copy of it also for like the art on the cover. Unfortunately, I do not have any myself, and I did not bring any with me, but you can find copies around. Just a little bit difficult because of the time of year and scheduling for a lot of people. So the difference between APAs and fanzines was APAs, basically a lot of creators, artists would come together, contribute to, one of these, and it would be distributed among the people that contributed. Fanzines were similar, but you could actually buy them publicly. And of course, we had Booty that started in 1976, started by Reed Waller and Ken Fletcher, and it was listed, I believe the slogan was the APA of the Funny Animal Fandom, which at the time, Furry was not a thing.
Furry did not exist. Funny animals were a thing.
And funny animal is not so much that the animals were just being silly, that's not actually what it means, it was the animals in the funnies, like the Sunday funnies, the comics.
Cartoon strips.
It's sort of a craft slang.
Yep.
Like comic book artists refer to the spandex trade being the superhero stuff.
Okay. Again, before minor details.
I learn something new every day.
Yep. So it actually started with very little adult content, contrasting the underground comic scene at the time. It's the cat, and then we had Omaha. We had Voodoo, which was pretty clean, all things considered. And then in the next issue, Omaha the Camp Dancer would begin, which I believe we'll talk about a little bit later on. So Mark Molino and Rod O'Reilly, throughout this panel, you've probably heard these names before.
If you haven't, what's wrong with you?
If you haven't, you're clearly very new to furry history. So I'm getting the wrong arrows. Mark Molino, in the 1970s, would go to the sci-fi cons and meet with other fans of anthropomorphic animals. He was the creator of an original species known as the scale tears, which are pretty cool and unfortunately kind of forgotten by the modern fandom.
Actually, weirdly enough, there are people who, if you guys start seeing pine martens with
Antennas.
antennae, I've started to see more recently.
I want to make it.
There's a small group apparently that have been,
Ben Cook.
not just that, look around for the word skill tear in the VR chat. Because apparently there is a
So
public one now.
Rod O'Reilly met his partner at LostCon. Mark Molino met Rod O'Reilly, his partner at LostCon in 1980. And he was a founder of the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. Cartoon Fantasy Organization, which we will also be talking about in a minute. So these two have been kind of colloquially called the grandparents of the furry fandom because they played a pivotal role in the early days and going forward. And they're usually at this con, but I don't think they're here. And if they were here, I would be scared.
If they were here, guaranteed they would probably be in this room. Because I don't remember the questions and everything that we had for them at their panel.
Yeah.
I guarantee you they'd be questioning your ass the same way.
Was that it?
Just to keep you on your toes.
Was that at FurCon last year?
Yeah, they were here last year.
They actually had a panel very similar to this
Just gonna take these off.
in the other hall last year.
Yeah, they did a Q&A. I'll put it like this. I'm young, so I'm learning a lot of this stuff secondhand. They lived it, so if I get something wrong, they're gonna know right away. And here are some really quickly done cutouts of the two of them. And that's the skill tear.
That's a skill tear.
That's a skill tear.
I was gonna say, you need to keep that on screen for a little while longer because these things are adorable and until recently, they were pretty much forgotten by our community.
So Cartoon Fantasy Organization, did not mean to play that right away. And that's, okay, I guess I didn't do the line by line on this one. So the Cartoon Fantasy Organization was a Los Angeles area founded in the late 1970s, and no founders included Mark Molino, and of course the late Fred Patton. You've not heard of Fred Patton, he was a furry historian, but more broadly a comic book historian, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, I think he passed away in, I believe, 2018?
I don't remember the
2018, 2019.
Too. Hell of a loss too.
So this, yeah, really was. The C/FO was focused on bringing Japanese animation, obviously anime as we know it today, to a Western audience. It was the first anime club in America, and it was a huge contributor to the creation of the modern anime fandom, which is why some people will like to go out and spew that furries created anime in the Western states. It's not entirely true, but
I mean,
well,
we had a hand in each other. That's the
That's
worst way to phrase it, but it's the best way to say it, I think.
So the club's members also featured overlapping interests with Panther characters, and the mascot of the club became Fanta, one of Molino's field players. I don't know if I have an image of that on this slide. And the C/FO would create over 36 chapters across North America over time.
Good.
He has spasms. It's okay. And unfortunately, chapter rivalries and rise later on would lead to the club being on the decline and disbanding. And I'm not going to play this whole thing since we are trying to be a little weary of time, but these were some old videos. These were some old stop motion films they did for the club as like little openings. Of course, that's the skills are. I believe it's Fanta. Let me skip around a little bit because we're keeping an eye on time, and I have other videos I want to share too.
Yeah.
But might be a little bit uncanny by today's standards, but these were in the very early days of the fandom. And
These were very much part of our history,
Very
very
much.
much a thing that was a
like,
huge influence too.
I just hit this here. Okay, cool. You have to deal with the top of the moment, I'm sorry. All right, so funny animals, getting further into the Furry Fandom. Funny animal, what?
I'm fairly certain F11
F11. Yes, F11. Nope. Then F11. Nope, that won't fix it either. Option F. Okay, now I'm just creating hell.
Bring up Chrome again. Why is that a new window?
That is a great question.
I forgot your Mac.
I don't know, Mac.
Neither do
I didn't close it, did I?
My brain defaulted it to freaking
What did I do?
Windows.
You killed it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Pardon the old man moment.
I don't like Mac. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Don't worry about it. So, Funny Animal Fandom was supposed to be new for fans of funny animals. They were not about, I explained this.
You already went through this.
Materials such as Warner Bros. Cartoons, Disney films, and comics like The Fox and the Crow. And they largely served as a precursor of what would later become the Furry Fandom. You know that? That's something else. Did I actually skip the slide or something?
No, you got it right. Fox and Crow are.
Yep, there's Fox and the Crow. We got Lady and the Tramp? No.
Lady and the Tramp.
Lady and the Tramp, okay.
One of my favorites too.
I need to watch it. It's been a long time.
You definitely
So-
need to make sure you watch the sequel too.
Fandom was born in the 1980s. Obviously, Steve Galacci. Steve Galacci was the creator of a character known as Irma Thelma, who was a combat pilot in his little story. And at one of the East Coast Furry conventions, he displayed an art piece, not this one, and it brought in enough of fans around that were so interested that there was a little circle that developed around his booth, his presentation, and the discussion of this work carried up to his room. Am I missing something?
That was actually a science fiction convention that he had that in.
Oh, did I write a furry convention? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a science fiction.
It was science fiction. Okay.
Really quick, I also want to say, hey, the fandom was born in the 80s. So was I.
Sorry, I meant a science fiction convention. That was a typo. Again, very chonky panelers. You think a month and a half would be enough time to put this together?
Also,
That's
keep
all right.
in
There's a
mind-
lot there.
Yeah.
he's also very often this jittery, so
Yes.
expect typos.
Discussion of his work. So enough people were interested around that they went up to his room, and that was kind of the first impromptu furry party to exist. And
Yeah.
it's credited as some when the fandom truly kicked off. So he was the author and artist behind the anthropomorphics, such as this here. I don't actually know.
Open and show people what the interior backgrounds and stuff do. All the art in it is fantastic.
It is.
It's highly technical stuff, but it certainly fits science fiction genre.
Very gentle with this. I can't expect these. If you guys want to come up and look at this, you can. I'm just going to show
Just
you.
be very,
Very gentle.
very
Very
delicate
gentle.
with it.
It's very well conditioned for what it is. And of course, paper is not permanent. The longer we can preserve it, the better.
Also, again, I've got to interject here because have you ever seen Dexter's Lab?
Yes. Very long time ago.
Okay, then you'll get this one. NRF bait.
No.
Never removed from box, or in this case, never removed from sleeve.
Well, I should probably look at this.
That
I would,
particular episode of that cartoon popped into my brain when he was taking this out of the wrapper.
I would show it off, but it's. I might pull, if we have time at the end, I will happily pull it out. But it
And I'd
is,
say for anyone who's interested in getting a look at it, come up as that.
Yeah.
Come up the end of the panel.
well, I say that, but I believe there's something that's going on with this. So,
Sure.
maybe,
If we have
maybe I'll
time.
carry on to the hallway. It was a furry comic book anthology of animated things. And of course we got Ken Sample. And I gotta be honest, some of the furries have just some of the funniest names. Like Ken Sample, Sven Take It Off. There's some great names in this fandom. That's the chairman of
Cheetah.
Cheetah, yes, Cheetah. I don't talk about it, but history of furry music and Furry Music Foundation back in Euro Currents. A lot of his work and a lot of the other people's work. And Sven Take It Off was just a hilarious name, I'm sorry. So Ken Sample, who began drawing exotics, which was pretty much an early term for furries in 1975, and he created a character that resembled himself known as Ken Cougar. And this creation kind of would help influence the concept of personas down the line. It was one of the first early examples of somebody kind of creating an artistic animal version of himself. So that's Irma Felna, and that's what I have right here. And that was Ken Cougar. So fanzines and APAs, I'm not gonna go do this because we've pretty much gone through this, but we'll basically, they were sent from artist to a main publisher, and they were sent to the general public. They were sent via mailing lists.
For the record, this is a what, 50-something slide?
56.
56 slide presentation.
I don't know how far we're in it, so I'm trying to keep the pace going.
He's very much going to learn. This could have been done with like 10.
No, I really don't think it could have.
With the way we converse, probably could.
Yeah. So Birth of Raw Razzle, Booty came to an end in 1983 due to various production issues. It was hauled up by a new APA known as Raw Razzle by Mark Schurmeister in 1984. And some people, such as Fred Patton, and I like to, I prescribe to this myself, consider that to be the kind of real starting point for the furry fandom. So by my definition, his furry will be 40 years old next year.
A little bit, yeah.
Late Fred Patton, off Chris' own trend. Yep. That's where he said his funny animal fandom became furry fandom. And he's believed when the community reached its own critical mass and fans of many artists began self-publishing furry comics. Creators definitely on the rise. There was a large debate over when specifically furry fandom was it began, here too. Obviously, it really depends on how you define it. Personally, I think, like, early on, that was the proto fandom, this is the modern fandom. That is, we cover at least the first issue of, the first issue of Raw Razzle. And continuing in the 1980s, we have the room parties. The new fans began organizing room parties at major sci-fi conventions, San Diego Comic-Con 1985. Judy Nibber, who was one of the Cartoon Fantasy Organization founders, hosted a party in the hotel room. Rob Razzle hosted a party as well, leading to some overlapping attendance.
Quick question.
Yeah?
How close are we to the first group?
First group?
Yeah.
You know the first group.
And never mind, they're towards the end of the 90s. I'm going to leave him to
Oh.
pick up the pace a little bit. I will be right back.
Okay. WesternCon 1985, and then O'Reilly hosted their first Prank and Skill Terror party. It was named after their home in California, in Garden Grove, California, which is in the Los Angeles area. You can still go there. They host a monthly room party. I believe I mentioned that. It was impacted by COVID-19. I'm not sure if they're still running at the moment. They've been on and off. I believe they currently are, but I live on Michigan, so I haven't kept too much track of that because I'm not in California that often. WesternCon 86, there was the successor, which was the first titled Furry Party. Room parties became a staple of sci-fi cons. In BayCon 87, many furries began meeting en masse, with parties advertised by flyers. And 1 year, an unknown discontent attendee of the con graffitied a poster with the term skunk funker, which was essentially the first formal furry insult. It's a bit cumbersome compared to what we're used to today, but it was skunk fucker. In a little bit, we'll actually talk about the origin of the word gift too, if that interests you. And so yeah, this was the first year-old fur party. A lot of these came from the conference archive. We'll talk about conference in a minute, but their website's now just an archive of a bunch of old furry stuff. Obviously we had the skill tear gathering, and that was it for that slide. So, first convention.
Can you go back to that for just a moment?
Yep. Apologies.
Okay, the skill tear, I'm not sure if that's Ken Samples. Who signed that one? Was that signed by Ken or by Mark?
It looks like an S, so I'm assuming. Actually, I have no idea.
S would be Sybil, which was his
Sybil
band
or
name.
Sybil.
I see an S.
You can get a better look on the conference. It's literally conference.
Okay, that's a Mark Merlino picture of one of the skill tears.
Yep. First convention in the 1980s. Do I not mention the name here yet? Okay. 1988, room parties were overflowing in attendance, and Merlino and O'Reilly decided to pretty much do a trial run of their own convention to see if it would be successful. And Conference Zero was held in 1989 with a turnout of around 65 people. We've certainly come a long way in terms of attendance. The first furry con ever had a few dozen people. My first con had 300 people. I cannot imagine with 65 people. Is that even a convention at that point? You might not seem like a lie, but it was enough of a success that conference became a reoccurring event for many years. It was the first official furry con in history, and it continued to run throughout the 90s. Attendance would rise from hundreds to over 1,000. We will talk more about conference in a little bit. That was the, I believe it was for the con book? Or a flag or something, but it was the original conference. And I have a video here of some, I'm not gonna play the whole thing because it's like an hour, but just some footage from the original conference. Oops, I did not mean to do that. What did I do? There we go. Okay, I
I'm
guess I
trying
can't
to
just.
hit the arrow keys.
I'm trying to hit the arrow
Mac,
keys.
And it's still tied to the slide.
Mac OS, yep.
I'm not sure if that's a Mac OS thing. That might just be the Google Slides.
I'm just
thing.
gonna skip around a little bit then. I'm just gonna keep it simple because time, but you can find these on YouTube, I believe. Is that by Prancing Skill Terror? Okay. There's Prancing Skill Terror. There's somebody else who's uploaded a bunch of stuff, a bunch of old videos. I don't remember what the name was, but just look up like conference footage on YouTube, and there's like a ton of it from every single year. The furry renaissance in the 1990s. 1990s were a major turning point for the fandom because the early internet became more accessible. Still not quite the World Wide Web, but it was more accessible to the, I was gonna say the average furry, maybe not the average person, but it helped connect furries across the nation and help grow the community. Conventions found a footing, and conference kind of spearheaded that by proving that we are big enough to host our own events. There were also the first major internal debates and conflicts, which would shape the future of the community. We'll get to that. So before the World Wide Web, there were a few different avenues for online communication. They didn't have. Explore.
There we go.
Oh,
It's teasing us. You turn your back, it disappears, and when you look at it, it's there again.
oh Lord. So furries took the internet as a way to stay connected because the internet is great for that, even when it was still a pain in the ass to use.
You have no idea.
No, I don't, because I wasn't born until the year 2000. I literally bypassed all of that.
Yeah, trust me. Let me put it to you this way. I realized what we were talking about when I sat down. And there's a sound that's in my head now, and I can't get it to
The dial-up?
fucking leave. Yes. I hate you.
I know the dial-up sound. I think most people here have heard it before.
Have you heard it firsthand?
No, I have not. TV.
Different ones coming out of the machine.
BBSs, which were bulletin board systems. They allowed commuters to connect to a server through a terminal program like the command line, or well, a good modern analogy is the command line in Windows.
Yeah.
Public message boards were kind of like a precursor to forums in a way. I'm not fully familiar with the
Same
layout.
concept, different name.
I'm not fully familiar with how BBS work because obviously they're not really around anymore. Many furries communicated online primarily through the Usenet group called .fan.furry, which was launched in 1990. What are you laughing about so much? You laugh and I think I've done something wrong.
No, it's because I remember late 90s there was a group that tried to essentially recreate that exact.
Oh, we talked about a few of them. Tiger's Den BBS started as a sci-fi bulletin board system, but it became populated by furries and was eventually relocated to Prancing Skill Terror as far back as 1993. IRC, anybody here know what IRC is? I still use IRC. Internet Relay Chat was another early form of online communication. And YIFNet launched in 1995 and went running to 2001. It was succeeded by FurNet, which is still active today. For the record, YIF was an extra term like that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Muds and Mucks.
Those are my specialty.
So has anybody here ever played like an MMO? Or like VR chat? Or imagine that, but it's text-based.
Instead of walking around in the world, you would hit, you want to walk north, enter, and then read the description of the room. This is what is referred to as a multi-user dungeon or the multi-user
chat kingdom. So yeah, there are text-based role-playing game environments. They operated sort of as a perpetual D&D session is how I guess I described it.
Yep.
And each mod had its own set of rules and its own world. And then there were mucks, which were chat kingdoms, which were basically, we don't want to fight monsters or each other. We just want to talk and have a good time. So
Yeah.
that would lead to. I might be on the next slide. Yeah. Okay.
I want to see if you, I don't remember if you did or not. I want to see if you get into the specific version of those that is actually still around today and very common.
I don't think that I did.
Which would be a mush, which is a multi-user shared hallucination. Which honestly I think is the best way to describe them, first of all. Second, it is closest to D&D in the sense that you have a skill sheet and a character sheet, but it's all done by digital dice roll rather than, command line input.
I know a lot of this is still really early. Half of this slide is like pre-2000, or half this panel is like pre-2000.
This, by the way, is where I'm going to start getting even more talkative too, because this is roughly where my experience with this community begins.
I don't know if I talk about Furry Muck later on, so I'm going to mention it now. Furry Muck was, Furry Muck. It was the muck that was created by furries and used by a lot of them.
Dr. Cat, I think, was the
Dr.
name of
Cat?
the gentleman who was connected with
I
that.
might have actually mentioned it in the Unix hackers. I might actually mention it here. So the Unix hacker subculture sort of cropped up in the 60s, 70s at major universities. It's Berkeley, MIT, Stanford. I'm not put a closing bracket there. Members of the community got involved in the furry community, and such as the Furry Home, which was a commune home on Carnegie Mellon, on the University of Carnegie. Yeah. I'm not going to, the CM University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Claire Benedict and Drew Maxwell were some of the members of the home, and they created Furry Muck after their primary Mud Islandia closed. And so the Unix had a bit of an influence on furry, obviously fandom slang, hackers, and techies really like their own slang, and a lot of furry likes slang too, and a lot of our words actually were kind of derived from them, such as mundane, which I don't think is used as often these days, but it was essentially a term used to meant people that weren't, if you weren't a furry, you were a mundane, you were part of the normal.
That's an old sci-fi term, for sure.
Revar of Furry Muck was the lead programmer behind the protocol Mud Client, Trebuchet, MU Star, because it was stand-in for Mud and Muck Client. And one of his earlier personas, Foxin, inspired a smaller collection of terms known as the Foxish language. And Yif was originally meant to be literally just a sound that meant very happy and positive, and it later got twisted into its more contemporary meaning. YIFNet became a major furry hub due in part to Yif's new definition and new popularity. And I actually have I believe it's from Wiki for the little guide to the Foxish language, which growth, mirth, yap, yarp, yerp, yip, yip, and another yip.
All I've got to say to this is, GIF is my favorite thing in this entire topic because we have a sound that goes from to didn't take very long in this community.
So, okay, fans and lifestylers. Now we get to start into some of the fun stuff. You want to talk?
Nah, that you said lifestylers.
Lifestylers is one of those terms that has had so many different definitions over fandom's history that it's
I'm well aware I
a
live
little
that
bit
life.
confusing. So in 1996, there was this lovely thing called Six Shallow Graves that Richard Chandler published in his Gallery fanzine, and this editorial was a rather inflammatory piece of literature that stereotyped 6 groups of the fandom and kind of pretty much attacked them. And he followed up on this topic in alt.fan.furry, which would go on to spark flame wars. This elitist movement was not the first one of its kind, and it would not be its last. Eventually, an agreement was made between the opposing sides in the argument, and the lifestylers would go on to form a new group, alt.lifestyler.furry, which is where the two different bulletin board systems that at least I'm most familiar with in the fandom from that era came. So what exactly was fans and lifestylers? They were denoted members of obviously the separate boards, but they were kind of described as separate groups, although group is probably a bit generous because they weren't really organized communities. To my knowledge, they were more like terms used to denote people in the fandom who believed
Here's a super simplified way to separate the two groups.
Yeah.
Fan is somebody who is
passive.
passive. They might go to a convention nowadays, like they're the equivalent of, I come here for the art. But
People for whom it was just a hobby.
Pretty much.
For them, it was just a hobby.
It's very nuanced, but yeah, that's all pretty accurate.
A lifestyler, it is very much a part of our everyday life. And good example is I've straight up barked at a boss once.
That is true, but it was also a little bit different back then.
I'm aware.
So furry fans were members of the communities, and aside from prominent artists, had more passive interaction. They consumed content such as furry cereals and commercial media. And there were the lifestylers who built themselves up as a community that was embracing the newer, broader, and often controversial aspects of the fandom. Spirituality, pedophilia, which obviously are still, for some people, a little bit out there.
Legitimately what I was getting to.
But also things like fursuits, role-playing, and personal furries, or personas as they would become, which are pretty much core parts of the fandom now.
Yeah.
So
A lifestyler back then was somebody who was willing to put forward the money to create a suit and actually wear it.
that's a good way to put it.
It's the people who are willing to go to the extreme of, this is uncomfortable as shit to do, I'm gonna do it because it's fun.
So while some overlap existed, spiritual furries were more focused on like totem animals and spirit guides. They were separate, for the most part, from Therians or other kin who identify as animals, and they primarily existed on the alt.furries.werewolves bulletin board system.
You're fine.
What, finally?
Nothing, never mind.
Okay. The definition of furry lifestyle changed pretty over time. Yeah, we covered that.
It's changed a lot.
I don't know if I'm actually gonna read this or not, but this was basically their definition. Such topics include not limited to animal identities, alter egos, spirit guides, the wearing of spirits, collars, furry clothing, all this stuff. This is part of a post that was pretty much, I believe it was automatically reposted like every 6 months on the Lifestyler bulletin board.
It was their charter. They were one of the few alt sites that actually had an approved commercial charter.
So now we get on to zooting.
Really quick before we go on to that, I need to point out there's one group in the lifestylers that are one of my favorite that usually get overlooked. Because there was a group, nowadays they're pretty common, but they were shifters. People who believe that in private situations, they could literally become their persona.
That's something I'm super familiar with. The good news,
It was a very niche thing even in lifestyle groups.
I'm mentioning this now, even though I know I talk about it later. those bulletin board systems are archived. If you go into Google Groups, you can find them and everything, pretty much everything that was ever on them. They were archived by some company, I forgot their name, I probably have it somewhere in here, and then Google bought them out and merged them into groups. So you can actually go and look at all of this old furry history yourself.
Deja vu.
Pardon?
Deja vu.
Deja vu. Fursuiting today is a mass part of the fandom, and it gets a lot of press coverage because furs are very photogenic. There's debate about what is considered to be the first real fursuit, because obviously it depends on, is the person a furry? Did they make it with the intent of being a part of the fandom? Where do you separate mascot costumes and fursuits? But one of the most first really popular ones was Hill of the Bambioid, which was created by Robert Hill, who was a former Disney mascot performer. In the 90s, suits were far less common. Furry cosplay usually involved makeup and individual accessories such as tails and ears. Nowadays, it's mostly just suits, but like makeup, people would get really creative back then.
We still got a couple people, at very least in one of the groups that I'm in California, who skin tight bodysuit. What's not covered in the bodysuit, i.e. hands, face, feet, painted to perfection by hand by themselves.
We can do a time check real quick.
305.
305, okay. Okay, we're doing pretty good for time, because we're 10 minutes behind, because we're getting close to Y2K. So, fursuits, fursuits were quite different. Back then, they were almost extensively made by individuals. There weren't really any formal fursuit makers back then, because the fandom wasn't big enough. You couldn't really make a career out of it like you can today. And originally, the terms were zooting and zoots before the term fursuit would become common. Cosplay often went beyond suits, such as masks and makeup. And some of the most notable suitors from the time, Sean Keller, who helped run the furry costuming panels at Conference, and Yippee Coyote, decided to include, who debuted his first fursuit in 1996 and really helped pioneer the art form. I am not going to remember who this is. I'm sorry. This is Hill of the Bambioid. You remember? You know who that first picture is? I know it's probably one of those 2 or 3 people I mentioned. I'm just not remembering.
That vaguely looks like Yippee Coyote.
It's probably Yippee Coyote. And now that's just a random picture I got from one of the conference videos, but it really shows you, like, I'm pretty sure that's made out of like face clay.
That's prosthetic working face clay, yes.
Yeah, people were really creative back then. So conventions throughout the 90s would also continue to be on the rise. Conference really set the blueprint.
Hold that thought. Doesn't need to be full.
What? Oh, okay. Conference really set the formula for many cons, but also modified some aspects. Charity auction is an example. Conference did take a lot of DNA from the big sci-fi cons, but it also helped bring in some of the furry DNA that's become common in conventions today. Albany Anthrocon started in 1997. Abby's Sly Fox organized the first formal fursuit parade that year. Midwest Fur Fest started in 2000, and it is now the biggest furry convention in the world. By Y2K, there were at least 20 different conventions worldwide. And I don't remember how many there are today, but there's around 100 if not. So yeah, Anthrocon, and I guess that's the image I put there. So unfortunately, Conference was, it kind of peaked in 1998 at a total of 1,250 individuals, which is nothing to shake a hand at, especially for that early in the fandom.
You have to use that phrasing right after Twitch.
Post-conference, the con would unfortunately begin to decline a little bit. The reputation would become plagued by a lot of different rumors. Certain events have been criticized, such as the pet auction, the Cabaret Furry Dance. And the Cabaret Furry Dance was a variety show that often featured erotic dancers, and it started at CF3, and it featured Omaha Sternberg, who assumed the role of Omaha the cat dancer from the Boys comic. It was actually created to raise money for him, who was undergoing intensive treatment for cancer at the time. And after that, it just became a mainstay charity event for the convention. The media began noticing the convention more with Care 11 News, who did a segment including the showcase of the more adult events. That's kind of where media coverage started to pick up a little bit. In reality, the decline was a perfect storm of the convention. It moved from SoCal to San Diego, which is familiar with California, is on the complete other side of the state. The dates changed from January to April for the first time and for other more mundane reasons. Nonetheless, it was something people debated. Maybe not so much now, but really prominently talked about on Furry at the time. The conference came to an end shortly thereafter. CF10, Marlena stepped down and Daryl exiting that group for a grand total of $1 US, if I'm not mistaken. Attendance would continue to decrease and eventually the salon would close in 2003. It was succeeded by Calmiford, though, carrying over some traditions from a lot of the former staff. Unfortunately, I believe that con has also recently shut down. But I believe there is another one that has popped up in this place. I'm not familiar with which one.
I was actually at that San Diego con, the FC con, and one of the main complaints that attendees had was at that venue that year there was like no adult content allowed, which was kind of new, and that
San Diego Con, which year?
no, not San Diego
Conference.
conference.
Oh,
at
so
San
they basically
Diego.
had a porn ban.
Yeah, it was kind of like the new venue wasn't a hit, and also like they had some new policies. It just kind of like perfect storm, like exactly like you said.
Yeah, this is way later on, but it's kind of like RMFC where it was just a lot of different things that kind of fell together. And unfortunately, so I'm not going to play this whole thing, but this was the Cure 11.
Absolutely wild. See if you can guess which creature it was. In tonight's expert, the growing subculture, people can call themselves furry.
Well, the next door neighbor or colleague at work might be one, and you never know it. Furries talk to each other on the internet, go to parties together, and what if the same four-legged friends. Carol, my daily reason travel across the country as a group of Minnesota furries. It's a tale you won't forget.
Julie Bowman of St. Louis Park was 12 years old when her grandma taught her.
You turn that up a little bit, anyway.
Julie's sewing tails for a group of friends who call themselves furries.
It's a Berman tail. So, another, I didn't make any squirrel tails yet, okay.
This is on
Julie's
YouTube,
furry
you can watch
friends
this.
go to conferences together.
It's Cure 11 News Conference.
Emphasis on the fur.
Julie also made this purple guy for a friend named Lance. You'll meet Lance a bit later. He goes to conference too.
It's like being a little kid and having permission to do it for the entire week with a whole bunch of other adults that are acting like little kids.
My name's Max.
I like the call.
I've been to it for about 6 years now.
Bunny's a furry. Mickey Mouse.
No, I just needed a tail really badly. I really wanted a tail.
Actually, it was a dream. It's just not funny. Oh, hi.
Costume number 1.
Last month near Los Angeles, more than 1,000 furries herded together from all over the country. They strutted their stuff, spread their wings, and wagged their tails at this convention called Conference 8.
I like playing role-playing games.
Okay, what is furry stuff really all about?
I can't tell you that. If I tell you that, we'll have to kill you.
My God, Mark looks so young. Fucking Christ, you paused it on the perfect image. Also, I gotta say, you looked a bit like Weird Al Farrell at one point.
It's Bob Hill.
Bob, was that Bob Hill?
That's Bob Hill. I got to hang out with him before he died in 2018.
Oh, he passed away too.
Yeah. I have a lot of stories to tell. About Bob.
I'll try to host a panel. We need more people that
Host a
can
panel,
tell stories
seriously.
and host a panel, record it too, and put that on YouTube.
Yeah, we could talk next year.
If you ever need help with that, we're
You know what?
definitely.
I actually don't have anything. If you want to talk about the panel, that's fine, because I just have to move out of here. I'm gonna not play the rest of that because again, a little pressed for time and we want to keep it moving. You can look that up, Care 11 Conference. They go on to talk about things like the Reptile Dance, among other things, and drew enough attention to it that it kind of created a domino effect where over time more of the adult fandom was showcased and eventually became the only thing that was showcased.
Where was that TV station? KARE?
That's from Minneapolis, St. Paul.
I actually don't.
It's Minneapolis, St. Paul. Yeah.
Also,
NBC station.
I've got to point out, they had one of the worst symbols because seeing it out of the corner of your eye, it just looked like the name Karen.
I said Paul Majors because he used to be at Channel 2 in Los Angeles. So he went to CBS 2, yeah.
All right, so now we get to talk about probably the most overly Yeah, he knows what's coming. The most okay, so a lot of furry history isn't known about, but there's one topic that a lot of people seem to be familiar with to some degree. Would you like to?
A little bit. I do have something to interject. Fair warning. So, my experience in this community started very early. The flame war started a little before I joined. I joined at a very weird age of 10 in 98, and we will get to why that's significant, but my first 3 or 4 years in the community were traumatizing, to say the least, because of one particular group.
So, the Furry Manifesto was an article written by Squirrel on her website in the 90s. She discussed her viewpoint on the fandom and its members in a rather inflammatory manner. For up to me, people would just talk civilly, but some people have anger they need to vent. She denounced stereotypical archetypes of fringe and minority groups in the fandom, including the spiritualist, zoophiles, which I don't think anybody likes.
I don't think anyone.
I don't think anybody likes zoophiles. And even vegans, funnily enough. These spoke
Can be pretty good.
Spoke of these groups allegedly gatekeeping on what really furry really meant, and tried to portray an ideal of pushing away perverted parts of the community.
You're not a real furry.
You're not a real furry if you don't do this. And there you go. Burn furs, yep. Anybody here familiar with burn? Like heard the name burn furs? Okay, so about half of you, yeah. Okay, so the article was linked and posted on alt.fan.furry, which within a few days started another heated debate. The name Burn Fur was brainstormed and stuck, and their stated goal was against adult fetish aspects, if not eliminated. Do I have a quote here? Oh, I do quote this, yeah. If not eliminated, then pushed to the far outer fringes and rendered irrelevant to the fandom at large.
Now, who said that?
I believe that was in one of Squirret's posts. If it's either that or it was one of the all that kind of furry posts. Should have wrote that down. Became
I
highly.
remember that one in particular because that was one of the things I tried to stay very far away from in the early years. As I actually ran into one of their members in person my first year.
Became highly opposed and controversial with various allegations against members from being anti-pornography, homophobic and more. Despite having founders, the movement had very little organization, with many members spreading their own opinions and beliefs. And they were big enough and annoying enough that there was opposition that formed against them. Pretty on the nose named the Freezing Furs, who existed solely to fight against the Burn Furs and their ideology. And then there were peace groups that decided to pop up as well, such as the Fleet Collars for the Peace of Non-Aligned Furs and Furry Peace, who literally were just like, can you two stop fighting?
Furry Peace was, I was under a different name to some degree apart. Big reason being, I had a run-in, and to let you guys know, when I say this group was a group of extremists, there were some in it that you could talk to without any worry. I ran into one of their members literally at my school. He giggles. I lost 3 teeth and had to have part of my face stitched back on.
Oh my.
Who was that individual?
I do not remember his name. I remember his face though. Little taller than me, a lot skinnier than me, blonde hair, green eyes, at the time had braces and very lanky. And all I remember is as I was laying there barely conscious, I hear the words, "Burn Furs don't tolerate fucking faggots." So yeah, there were some in this group that were straight up, no questions asked, they were extremists.
And that's the problem with a lot of groups like these. Even in more recent history, you get groups that are so loosely connected that you can have an experience with one of the members that might have their own extremist beliefs, and it kind of paints this reputation for the entire community. I'm not defending them at all, but it's like you said, there were some people there that were, more normal people, and then you have the extremists.
I've straight up had conversations with some of their members, more recently now, less when I was a kid. I was very much an emotional child. I've had conversations decades later with some of their members. Can't remember his name, but one of them is a blonde, white unicorn who very much likes his guns. I've had conversations with them, and a lot of them were fairly, willing to talk, even if they didn't like you. They were civil. Then you had some of them that straight up wanted you gone.
By 2001, though, they were officially being more or less died out.
Yeah.
There are some people that still hang around or stuck around for a long time.
They
but
actually migrated to another group.
Sorted Little Business, that was a screenshot from her website, one very sort of famous. It's great. And that was their logo, which really feels like it was designed in the 90s.
Yeah, designed in the 90s with the mentality of military brigade.
So, back onto a topic. I love how a lot of furry history is either furries fighting against each other or furries fighting against outside of the fandom.
Oh, we are very much like America in the early 2000s. Prior to 9/11, it was, we were all trying to kill each other. Give us a reason and something to focus on that is a greater threat to all of us. I don't care if I dislike you, I hate them more.
I can't help myself, I was going to say this for the end of the panel, but right now, AI art. Whatever your opinion is on it, is a very fresh, heated debate.
Very
That
fresh.
is going to
very
have
heated debate.
repercussions for the entire fandom going forward.
Very much so.
That is history in the making as it is happening.
Oh, and to add just a little to that, 9 times out of 10 historically, it doesn't matter which side you are on any of these debates. Usually the way shit works is things tend to fall towards the middle of an argument. Good example with the burn furs. The more tolerant ones of them, they just really didn't like the idea of people being willing to do things with animals or younger members of the community. I can agree with that.
Furries versus the media. So around Y2K, furry was growing as a community, but was still a relatively small group before the internet kind of blew things open. There was press coverage prior to 1998, but it was the turning point where fandom coverage began to kind of exponentially increase and domino down. Furries would unfortunately receive a lot of bad press, most often misleading or outright incorrect in their reporting about the community. This would cascade for years to come, and is unfortunately why the broader world misunderstands the fandom. You have a video on there. So this was just kind of a list of notable bad media coverage that happened. Bad media coverage that was not made in good faith or was very misleading.
The most iconic one better be on here.
I'm pretty sure it's its own slide.
It very much needs its own
Creature
slide.
Comforts by Mary Claire Magazine. It is, because there's a whole story about it. Creature Comforts, Mary Claire Magazine, is an article about a furry couple that focuses on their life and emphasizes more of the eye-catching aspects. Heavy Petting by Loaded Magazine, 98. It's an article that featured primarily on the sexual aspects, particularly zoophilia. Pleasures of the Fur in Vanity Fair 2001. A story about a reporter's visit to MFF, but once again focusing more on the adult aspects, begins the article with, judging from the Midwest Fur Fest, this is no hobby. It's sex, it's religion, it's a whole new way of life.
Quite literally, it was like any time you saw a reporter, first thing they're gonna start asking about is sex. If they don't, they're trying to get to that subject. They just wanna make you feel more comfortable first.
I think his name was George Gurley.
Who did?
The Pleasures of the Fur.
Oh, the guy who was interviewed?
He was the man that wrote it.
Oh, okay. Plushies and Furries, the Sex 2K episode, which I think I have a clip down there. Was on MTV 2002, with a short documentary about the fandom as described through a mostly sexual lens. The Associated Press Indiana Post Tribune 2002. This is a fun one. There was a misprint in an educational magazine that led fourth graders to a Furry Fandom website, which was, I'm trying to remember which one was which, but it was fur.org and fur.com. They got them mixed up, and there was stuff on the site, and that's what they reported on. And of course, for living. Anybody here know the CSI episode? You at least heard the phrase "that CSI episode." I don't know if it's as common nowadays, but it was big then.
Have you heard that thought before we go any further? One, I see a question.
What's up?
Have you heard you can literally Google that episode and it'll pull it up?
I've purchased it on YouTube.
People think of it as a documentary.
Oh,
I kid you not.
No.
People think all of CSI is documentary.
It's crazy.
Okay, so I need to point this out.
yes.
On the topic of that
You're
episode,
part hyena.
dare I tell you guys I own that head?
You do?
Wait,
I own
wait, Sexy the Cat? You own Sexy the Cat?
I own the head, yeah.
Come up here on camera real quick.
Yeah, it was purchased at a Hollywood garage sale.
Oh, that is insane. That is cool.
I own the head, it sits on my entertainment system at home. Here, I'll show you a picture.
I'm
Come on up here, introduce yourself.
gonna pull up this clip real quick before we get too much in. Oh yeah, let's see.
This is the kind of sidetracking we don't mind.
Hooray. I'm in here early because I went in the family next.
Apologies, by the way, if we go a few minutes.
Yeah, we took a minute. We're 10 minutes late started. Yep, that's the head. You wanna hold that in front of my camera real quick? That is the fursuit head. Yep. So, following program is
Okay, hold up. Again, the other thing that I was going to mention is my mother was a fan of CSI. She had a habit of making certain she got home for the new episodes. I knew I was a furry before this episode.
Can you make sure that's still focused? Because I know when I'm close.
I very,
It's okay now?
very distinctly remember choking on my burger the second I saw Sexy the Cat, and it was one of those, are you kidding? Oh, this isn't gonna be good.
Farming fursuit can be sexually arousing. Half of the sexual appeal for the fursuit isn't for just, someone in a costume. It's for the fursuit. In fact, you're having sex with someone who is, he's all furry, he's got this furry sort of head, big ears or muzzles.
Okay, I think I'm gonna cut it there.
Thank you.
So yeah, more or less, first impressions are lasting impressions, as has been said. Imagine that's your introduction to what a furry supposedly is. That is why a lot of the broader world still does not understand the fandom very well. So,
Because of that episode, I've all had to explain to my mother not once, but now in her aging years, because of slipping memory 3 times, that no, furry is not that group of people that fuck animals.
And then you have the flip side with the Lucifer episode. By the way, I was in that episode. And Sexy Kitty was on the lot for the filming of that episode. I brought it with me.
CSI was an extremely popular show. That CSI episode became a common phrase when discussing it. It almost became an in-joke because you find people on the street and be like, oh, that CSI episode? They're talking about furries. So the production, they actually reached out to SoCal to fulfill extra roles, and Saber Fox, who was the leader of the SoCal Furries Yahoo group, unfortunately I could not look into this. I could not find the group because Yahoo was shut down. Opened a discussion offering feedback about the script. Feedback was given, but was ultimately ignored. And in total, 10 furries answered the casting call, of which only there was one fursuiter, Berku, in his Java fursuit. I don't think I have a clip on here, he's a kangaroo. He walks out on, it's a shot of the catwalk. He's the first guy who comes out, messes with his goggles, then walks back. He's on for like 3 or 4 seconds. Every other fursuiter in that was an actor, and something from Walmart probably. Friend loathing has become sort of a poster child for bad media press due to its popularity. Another clip here because I was gonna get my own clip, but there's so much, let's just say YouTube's made it hard to record clips of stuff that you buy from them. So I had to find a second.
Simultaneously, YouTube has made it very hard to forget about shit like this.
That's the first suit.
Excuse me. I'm Captain Willows. I'm with the crime lab.
I understand if you're a suitor and that is your response to a police officer coming up to you, get out of the suit. You really need to learn etiquette.
Okay, the arrows are being read again, I forget.
We're gonna need samples of your fur.
We're also gonna need to talk to you without the masks on.
Do you have any problem with it?
You can ask a human being to make a mask.
Thank
And-
you for not playing
The rest of it.
interrogation scene.
I don't think it was in that clip.
Good.
So now we can move on to the internet age. So the World Wide Web brought the internet into the mainstream, and in the internet evolved many established platforms of the fandom. I'm actually going to be honest, I'm kind of relieved to be past all of that right now.
You're relieved. I'm not.
Yeah, because we got more stuff coming up.
There's at very least one thing in this era that is going to make
Not in this era. That's next era.
Nope.
Okay.
You didn't know about it, did you?
I don't know. I might not have. The internet involved many established platforms of the fandom, so I think I'm going to hold off because I think I discussed it. I'm remembering these are basically like little overview slides for each era. That's why I keep going ahead of myself. The popularity of the internet would cause an explosion in the amount of furries worldwide, and virtual environments would, I almost read that as social profit, would become a social point for furries. So the internet forums evolved to Usenet groups into something that was more accessible and versatile, like the ability to send files, and a bit more of a user interface. Love new features like attaching files and images, and archiving the most Usenet groups between Furry fans and Deja News, and that was later bought by Google and migrated to groups. Art websites help streamline sharing art remotely, something that was primarily done through fanzines and APAs. And these would continue throughout the 2000s, but many would come to an end. Webcomics became a more accessible way of hosting and distributing comics as well. And the new MMOs and virtual worlds such as Second Life expanded on the capabilities of the MOCs that came before. So here's a photo of Sabrina Online, which was some prints there. Some extremely old running webcomic by Eric Schwartz, who is still around, doing a lot of art. I believe runs his own website. So obviously fursuits, 2000s fursuits would gravitate more towards the contemporary style many of us are familiar with, more cartoony, more...
The more toony, the more colorful, the more eye-catching.
More, yeah.
Rather than the realistic.
Yeah. As the fandom grew, talented creators were able to start businesses and commercially made fursuits to members of the community. I guarantee you've heard at least one fursuit maker in your lifetime. As media coverage of the fandom would continue to grow, both positive and negative, fursuits would become an icon of the fandom due in part to their unique and photogenic design. You turn on news about furries, you're going to see all fursuiters. Tell me,
333.
Okay. That dancing dog, that is Duke. Not to be confused with a different Duke.
If you can confuse the two of those visually,
no, but I say the name Duke and everybody thinks of a different Duke. This Duke is
There's like 3 Dukes people would think of. Duke has become too common a name.
The only Duke I want is the one with my Xbox. In my hand. That sounds bad. Okay.
You have no idea because that at least leads to 3 different ones.
Golden age of the furry web. So in the early days, the internet was less established by larger brands. There was much more prevalence for independently owned websites. You could get a domain name and it would cost you $10 a month, like it does now. Many staples of furry fandom, some that still exist today, were born in this area. For Affinity was a content hosting website launched in 2005. It has become the biggest art sharing site on the fandom. Nation, which was a major multi-role website that operated from 96 to 2015, focused on social networking and content hosting. We got Flayra, which was a platform for news articles written by the community, launched 2001. E621, everybody's favorite. It was a Buru-style image board that launched in 2007. It's currently owned by Varka, who is also the CEO of Bad Dragon, if you were not familiar with that.
Everybody's favorite.
I giggled a little bit when I learned that, because given E621's reputation, it's kind of amusing. Yivstar, which was a content hosting website for furry creators that launched in 2002 and would later rebrand as SoFurry. You might be more familiar with that.
Yep.
And it's also notable for playing host to the most successful attempt to create an icon for the furry fandom, the feet paw. I unfortunately, actually I might have a photo of it on here. That's the old Furry Fandom logo, Furry Nation, Flayra. I think that was Giftstar. I don't have the feet paw on here. I made a mistake. It's like a paw, but it's got a little mathematical symbol in the center of it. It's not as common nowadays, but at the time it was pretty. You can still get on merch and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe last year I bought a flask that had a paper on it.
I believe I've seen the symbol on some of the things in the dealer's den today, so.
Yeah, it's still around. Virtual world, so Furry Monk would continue to operate with an active community. You can still connect today. You have to figure out what a mud client is and connect, though.
That one's easy, though.
Yeah, I mean, IRC's pretty easy, too.
Just don't Google how the fuck do you connect to that furry thing.
Second Life, released in 2003, it's a virtual world that supported user-generated content going through the assets. Second Life became a sizable social platform for furries to meet and roleplay. The ability to upload custom avatars and represent oneself as their character had a very special appeal, one that the fandom is still very comfortable with and is learning in a more virtual environment. We'll talk about that. There were other virtual worlds such as Furcadia and IMVU and Furvilla.
Oh, why is Furcadia on the fucking
I don't know.
others list? Sorry, that thing was influential as hell. Especially for early days.
I'm rephrase.
It was one of the first games where you could literally design your own world or dream. And it's literally where I learned to code.
I'm not trying to discount its importance. This is a nice video I'm gonna play most of if I can. It's about it's actually a more recent video, but it's about the furries, the furry community in Second Life. You've seen it? I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna stop it there, but it's a very beautiful video that showcases a lot of pretty much the last decade plus of Second Life in the furry community. So furries on the rise through the 2000s. Throughout the 2000s, size of the fandom would rise substantially as the internet became more widely available and more integrated into society. More people would naturally be exposed to the fandom. Dozens of conventions would spring up across the world. Over 50 different cons are documented by WikiFur for the year 2010. And the media would continue to feature furries. Some coverage was through the community, such as True Fox on the Tyra Banks Show in 2009. And anti-furs, as they became called, would be more common, trolling across communities online. They propagated on various websites, including Portal of Evil and Something Awful. Don't look that website up. Various insults and phrases would become meta humor, or times such as "Yip in Hell," and fur fags. And I believe I have, yep, Yip and Health. That's a classic meme that you get if you look up that phrase.
Do you have the newer version?
I don't think that I do. I do have this. If you go to kyo.tl, there's a graph that pretty much graphs all the furry different convention attendances over the years.
Nice.
This was very nice to find. And you can really see right about here, oops, and Y2K where everything just really started to take off.
By the way, because it does seem like you don't know about it.
Then I'll mention.
So, again,
That must have been FWA then. Yeah.
again, not going to mention any.
It's amazing. It's amazing how my first FWA was 2016 Camp Furry Weekend. Only had like 5,000, right? This year, 10,600 for the Lost City. It's amazing, and they're expecting 13,000 for FWA. I'm not supposed to say that, but plans are coming. They're planning ahead.
So,
40% increase, just 1 year.
Did you want to?
yes, if I can stop interrupting. Where was I? Oh, right. So, what a lot of people don't know is there was a huge issue in the 2000s, very early 2000s, in the furry community that was localized to two very, very, very important things. One being Second Life, and the other being IRC chats. And that would be, shortly after 9/11, the furry political climate went almost as berserk as it did in 2016. Personally, I wish I hadn't been, but you can't live in California and not get swept up in that.
So, with the internet becoming easier to access, minors would become more prominently involved in the community. The term was coined for these younger furries, young furs. Many young furs of the 2000s are now the active generation of the fandom. I mean, I wasn't a furry in the 2000s, but I was born then.
This was a title that I fell under.
Anthropomorphics found their way into the lives of many, and various literature such as Aaron Hunter's Warrior Cats, Animorphs, Space Jam. I keep seeing Lola Bunny. That's become a good reference point for a lot of people. Lion King, Robin Hood, Disney. A lot of these just naturally directed people into the furry fandom. And young furs today make up a substantial amount of the fandom, although we're not quite sure how many.
Both of those book series that you mentioned, I have almost complete sets of.
I have a complete set of Warrior Cats, and I still own them right now.
Animorphs, I'm missing like 5 Warrior Cats.
If you want to open them, look them.
Yeah, that red wall.
Speaking of, if you can look open the yard too, if you want. Those I can literally go for Amazon. Those are fine. You can open those all you want. These I'm just gonna ask you to be very careful with. This I'm probably gonna keep aside. So certain websites and apps would attempt to cater to a young demographic, such as furry teens and furry amino. Some of those work better than others. So we got Lola, Warrior Cats. And this is a study from Fur Science, who do the IALP. They do basically do a bunch of different surveys for the fandom. They've been doing it for a long time. I'll talk about them in a little bit. But it was a fun trend I wanted to show that the younger you get, there's more furries. And for reasons, they can't survey people that are minors. But I'm curious how this graph would continue, at least at the time that it was made, to show just how many young furries are in the fandom these days.
You might want to add red wall to that.
Red Wall?
Yeah.
Yes, the Red Wall series.
Thank you.
I'm actually not sure I'm familiar.
Oh no.
I'm not an encyclopedia, unfortunately.
Thundercats.
Yeah, Thundercats, yes. Okay, there's a long list. The list could go on. I just picked ones that came to mind. So that was the 2020 First Science Age survey. So that was actually pretty recent. And obviously we have furry teens. An era of learning, we were into the 2010s finally. So
Glossed over quite a bit.
this panel is already long enough.
No worries.
So
It's gonna get a little longer with the era we're about to go into.
improving media relations. So And by the 2010s, a lot of furries realized, hey, maybe we shouldn't just ignore the media. Maybe we should actually try to repair their understanding of fandom.
Thank you, Uncle Kage.
Uncle Kage is
Holy fuck.
controversial, but boy did he do a lot to kickstart
At
that
the moment,
change.
yes, but understand, he's also the person that pretty much perfected talking to the fucking media.
And he made Pittsburgh love Budokan. So, or maybe that's not accurate, but not too far off from it. So he often hosts panels about furries in the media. There's a couple of them on YouTube. Some of my favorite panels he's hosted. Furry Fandom has gradually received more positive press coverage in recent years. It's been on the incline. I've seen these groups like Fur Science with the International Anthropomorphic Research Project, which was is a Canadian-funded research group. Is literally just focused on researching the furry fandom. And they are the only group that is kind of doing so. So when you see people pull statistics out of their ass about fandom, this is pretty much where they're coming from. Kid, I don't know what you did.
I know exactly what I did. That cord runs under where my seat is.
So yeah, some of the only statistical data we have in the community comes from Fur Science, other works that aim to help educate people on the furry fandom. Culturally Yes YouTube channel talks about the fandom and its history, including an in-depth look in the history of fursuits. That's tied into why it's a little bit light on that because they've done an excellent job going through it. Moms of furries are parents with children in the fandom who want to help support other parents of furries. I know my mother has certainly appreciated them. Dominic Rodriguez is for documentary personas, holds a handful of unique members from the community that came out in 2016.
Really quick, again with the mention of moms of furries, back really quick to the topic of younger furs. Having been part of that group myself, please understand, I have seen a lot of people nowadays who I recognize from back in the day who have had that mentality of kids don't belong here. Please don't ever be that person.
They don't.
They were around when
It's
I was a
complicated.
kid.
They have to be on the. I'm not gonna. That's a whole debate. I will say, I love Uncle Kage. It is really hard to find an image of him that is not unflattering or terrifying.
I found a couple of the terrifying ones.
There are some.
There's a picture of him wearing a black suit and his bowler standing in front of a wall of flame.
That would be the one I was thinking of.
I have to see that. I have to
You
find it.
can probably find it maybe even on his website.
He has a website.
Yes, he does.
Actually, I don't know that. That's Moms of Furries. And now we're getting to the quote unquote mainstreaming of furry. Is furry mainstream? No. But there has been a little bit of mainstreaming of its existence.
My argument against this, God, what was the name of it? Everybody years ago would probably have it pop into their head the second I mention a Orangina.
Oh God!
There's my
I
argument.
should have brought
this
that.
not being mainstream.
I should have brought that
Sorry.
here. Okay, well, this is also more recent. Is furry mainstream? No. This is more
No,
like
I
we're
was
kind of
just infected
starting.
places.
You'll get what I mean. So throughout the 2010s, the reputation of furry fandom has improved noticeably both online and IRL. Not across the board, but it's getting better. Like I said, there's a long way to go, especially with the older generations who aren't online. I've noticed furries have a bad rep online for much different reasons than they have a bad rep IRL among the older generation. It's funny. So arguably the online reputation has improved far more than the broader world because the internet is more in tune, I guess is how I can describe it. With like, I don't know, like the furry is a very online present community, and so a lot of the older generation, unless they're following, like unless the media is talking about the fandom, it's not going to get as much attention as it would online.
Another thing he probably hasn't added to this is the online community is an unbelievably broad community. So you've got people from everything to Twitter furries, online furries and all that, all the way to the current era of IRC furries, muckers, gamers. That is a
I could do an entire panel
broad,
just talking about the
broad
structure of the fandom.
God, yeah.
I'm actually hoping to do a video on it. It's been on-
You're gonna need to do a fucking spider graph.
That's literally what I was thinking about doing, was a spider graph. I've literally like brainstormed it before how it would look.
It would take about an hour, but we should set up the entire room as the spider graph. and just have
I
it
want to make it,
across the
I
walls.
want to make a digital one. So anthropomorphic media, actually, I believe I might mention this. Anthropomorphic media has evolved. Media such as Utopian Beastars embrace anthropomorphism in the way similar to fandom. Guarantee you've heard these names if you are a furry. Zootopia, there was this lovely rumor going around that Zootopia was actually being marketed to furries. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I can tell you where that came from.
the fact that they used the word anthropomorphism explained it in the trailer.
No, the fact that they employed at least 4 furry artists.
That's actually funny because back in the day, I didn't mention
One
this.
of which was one of the people that helped design the entire aesthetic.
It's funny, I'm not surprised I didn't mention this, but back in the day, if you were a furry artist, and you worked at a place like Disney, you kept that shit private.
You very much did, because
they would-
if they found out, if the furry world, specifically the online community found out, oh god, you were going to have trouble, because your job would very quickly find out, and your overlords would very, very quickly fire you.
Furries in pop culture, so obviously we have Tom Fishback in 2 kinds. It's just a few examples of furries that are, maybe you don't know Tom Fishback by name, but Mark Fishback, has anybody here heard of Markiplier? Tom Fishback, 2 kinds is maybe not one of the best, but definitely one of the most popular furry webcomics in its history, and he's literally Markiplier's brother, if you weren't aware.
The funniest thing is,
Never heard of it.
has Tom gone on record a couple times saying he's not effectively a furry, he just uses the art aesthetic?
I don't know.
I have to ask him next time I see him.
Everybody loves C418, but the current Minecraft composer Lena Reyna is a furry herself. That is a photo of her.
Also the composer for Celeste.
And that's 2 kinds. So, furry social media. So, as the internet became more established by larger companies, social media would standardize a lot of online communication. And the rise of social media and its improvements over old social platforms led to many furry-owned forums declining and eventually closing down. Rest in peace, the fur community forums. What time are we at?
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, we got at least one person from their group. Do you guys mind if we go a couple minutes over?
As long as you don't mind that I start setting up.
I
have things that I have like.
Perfectly fine.
Totally okay. I don't know how many slides we have left, but I'm going to start going quickly. Furry forums was shut down in 2022. Rest in peace. That was my debut into the fandom socially. Many social platforms became core places for us to connect. Telegram, widely popular for misinformation. Twitter, known as X, I still call it Twitter.
Most people still call it Twitter. Sorry, I call it X as a joke, but it's still fucking Twitter.
Popular for artists and creators to share and promote their work. Amino, which was a branch of the Amino app, aimed to provide a completely safe work platform for younger furries. Succeed. YouTube was the primary platform for furry video creators in the 2010s. Discord, etc. Okay, political war. Let's try to breeze through this as fast as I can. For the sake of time and for the sake
I
of
can sum this entire war up in a very short concept. Would you guys like to hear it? If you're on one side, you hate the other side. If you're on the other side, you hate the other side. If you're caught in the middle, you're looking at everyone on both sides going, I just want to be a dog, yo.
In the mid to late 2010s, furry would become deeply embroiled in political hygiene for drama. U.S. 2016 election became one of the most politically aggressive topics in recent history. In the aspects of life and culture, including the furry fandom, the fandom was predominantly left-leaning and political bias, and the furries on the right became largely ostracized for their beliefs and opinions, even when they transcended the fandom. This is the political orientation of furries, and we're going to talk about height of drama. As you learn right now, furry fandom has always had internal drama to some degree. The mid to late 2010s stand out because of the frequency of high-profile cases and how often political leaning was a part of the discussion. Major cases include, but are not limited to the Ranting Griffin, Furist, Hero the Wolf, various YouTube commentary dramas, Cockroach Genesius Wolf, and some of the incidents transcended the fandom and became wider stories on the internet. And of course, we have this picture and that picture. We're going to move on.
I've got to point one thing out. no matter what side of the political argument you were on, he was still a fucking talking yam.
The ostracizing of right-sided furries. This is the funner slide. Use that.
I've been caught up at this one.
Furry raiders were born out of a small furry Second Life community. They became popularized due to the events surrounding RMFC and the press coverage of that event. They describe themselves as an all-accepting community, but have been criticized for actions and beliefs of some of its members. Alt-furry was a term used to denote a certain subgroup of furries. On one hand, one side of the community, such as the blogging Dog Patch Press, defines them as an alt-right hate group and condemning anyone linked to them. On the other hand, from the perspective of people like Griffin, they were just the community of people who felt the fandom lost its way. As a historian,
Personally, I think they're everything in between.
As a historian, I feel it's important to risk both sides myself, but during the height of the political war, I'm not anywhere going near it. It was a minefield. You got anywhere near this?
You said anything politically. I made that mistake. I'm sorry. I had people threaten to bomb my house. Fuck.
Yeah, so due to how volatile the situation was, people such as myself were caught in the crosshairs simply by not immediately picking a side. You just go in there, act nice to both sides, and they will kill
To
you.
both sides, you will get a day or so of, we will talk to you, and then it's pick a side or else.
More or less, it came down to, I just wanted to, I figured if you're honest, so you're up and honest, they're more likely to be honest with you too. And unfortunately, that can be difficult, which is why I have not fully figured out the all-furry situation.
Yeah,
It's still
no,
open-ended.
It's
Furries fandom's not ready for that yet.
It's really stupid.
A deep dive, this is the Dog Patch Press headline. In case we got Raiders logo and a photo of Foxer himself in the second one.
Okay, so I would point out I've talked to some of the Raiders. Some of them are okay, they're level-headed. People like fucking Foxler have absolutely no clue where the fuck their brain went after the day they were born. I'm sorry, his sanity is nowhere to be seen.
The Anther fandom movement in April 2020 to their anti-Griffin wedge and clashing anti-golfer. We talked about how we felt furry fandom had become too integrated by political furries and how fandom couldn't be saved. And he proposed the idea of an Anther fandom, a spiritual successor in his eyes to the original furry fandom. The Anther movement went to ground a lot during the pandemic. They weren't as widely discussed or as openly talkative. And the recently went on from Free for All, which we all know how that turned out.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has been a target of a lot of criticism, and their website is pretty tight-lipped on the people who run the convention.
That one's gonna be a special one to talk about way later.
Guests of honor have included to their anti-Griffin and sound effects. Here's a picture of the live streams in question, obviously Free for All's website. And now let's talk about something that's at least a bit more fun, the virtual evolution. COVID-19 pandemic has started in 2020, affected the world in a lot of ways. Many conventions had to close their doors during that time period as a result. In the years since, there has been a major rise in the new age of virtualization. Virtual reality and VTubing have become major trends that have shifted the fandom. And of course, we got our lovely Quest 2, which has gotten VR into the hands of many people. So pandemic, I really don't think I need to go through that. In January of 2020, the Japanese meeting of the furries, JMF, hosted a virtual lounge in addition to their main event. This was the first instance of the virtual counterpart being held as a furry convention. As the pandemic continued to unfold, the in-person aspect for many furries would grind to a halt as meetups and conventions posed serious risks. COVID-19, Anthrocon Online, virtual reality. VR chat released all the way back in 2014, and over the years has began developing a small but consistent contingent of furries. VR chat and sister platforms, Shell VR Neos, are a natural evolution of the games like Second Life, which in turn were an evolution of the old monks. The immersive design of VR allows for heavily simulated in-person interactions, which became a selling point as it skyrocketed in popularity during the pandemic. And VR also allowed individuals to see themselves as their characters in a way previously only attainable by owning a fursuit.
I brought my headset with me. I should have probably brought it to this panel.
For some people, it's, you can spend $3,000 on the fursuit, or you can spend $300 and make your
On a headset, make your own avatar for about another $100. And
it depends.
live your life in the
VR chat.
VR chat.
Virality. Valley Online Experience is a series of virtual conventions held in VR chat that are operated as a nonprofit. Many conventions run this way, including BLFC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I believe we have a portal somewhere.
Virality began their virtual events in 2020, becoming a popular alternative to conventions while they were on hiatus. In 2021, Luma became a massive success and has become one of the most famous themes to date, the idea of Luma, and of course Aqua was a continuation of that. In 23, Sylva amassed over 15,000 attendees, making it the biggest virtual convention in the world and also surpassing any in-person FurCon. Calling it the biggest FurryCon in the world is not very well liked by some people
It's
because
not very
it's
well
more
liked
accessible.
because in the world, the reason.
Almost done. There's a stigma to toting Frowdy out. So that's the Fox logo, that was me at Frowdy Aqua, it's me at Sylva, and this was the map of Frowdy Aqua. They had different worlds for each different part of the convention. This is how they operated still today. So VTubing in 2020 is making many new age creators, and the old ones would migrate away from YouTube and move to platforms such as Twitch. YouTube for a long time has been the dominant platform for video content in fandom, but as the first generation of content creators began to fizzle out, it's no longer the case. Now people are using things like Twitch and TikTok. VTubing has become a term for live streamers who use virtual software in place of a face cam, often using special software or even just VR chat. The larger trend is this is a larger trend, but mostly taking a major foothold in the creators around the community. Of course, we have people like Ivy Comb. Actually, I have my Ivy being blush. It's in my room. This is VC Face. This is a VTubing software that's based out of Unity. Of course, we have. My brain just died. I'm sorry. Data Loda. Thank you.
Yes.
She used to go by Wismod. Now she goes by Foxy for sure. Future Horizon. So that's it so far. We're at the modern day pretty much. Furry fandoms is almost predictable to predict. But as I said earlier on, we are now hints of what our next challenge is going to be as a community, and probably the next chapter in furry history. That is AI art. Like, not even going to touch that, but we're going to be monitoring that, keeping track of stuff. I can tell that's going to be the next big thing, even though it kind of already is.
I mean, it's gonna be the next big thing, but you know what, I'm gonna do to you what you did to me earlier.
What was that?
Because I guarantee you there will be a much bigger thing eventually.
That's what I'm saying is we're seeing the early part of it. So there's always room for
I want you to work out that way really quick when because I want them to see your response when I say the name. Hypnotist Sappho.
There's always room for positivity in the community. There's always that focus on scandal. I don't have time to do that now too. I literally don't have time to do that now. Resources and stuff. Joe Strikes Furry Nation, the Two Old Furry Fans podcast. That's Rod and Merlino. I don't know if we're still doing that though. So you've read Hatton, unfortunately passed away, but has done a lot of writing and stuff. Looking for sorta, not the most reliable. Always check their sources.
That is reliable.
Archive.org.
If they had less people.
Archive.org has saved my ass more times than I can count. It's just the internet, basically the Internet Archive branch. BBS Archives are in Google Groups. SeamlessFurryDolphin.net has run some well-informed articles. Not well-informed, but he talks about a lot of things that other people have not. Ash Coyote made a pretty decent documentary on the fandom, and there's a lot more to the endless. And as a nod to my friend Sotolo, and then not too recently, there was a virtual furry museum in PRJ you should go check out. So, closing, final thoughts, questions, blah, 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 blah. If I have anything wrong, please let me know, is what I would say if we
Let's do this. If any of you actually have questions, we're going to move out into the hallway, so
Yeah.
these gentlemen can set up. Meet us out there.
We're gonna go out there. Okay, guys. You handle this. I'm gonna